Hello, thank you for attending the La Plata Democrats Club Luncheon. The goal of the club is to bring together all Democrats, from the most conservative to the most progressive, to celebrate our shared values and appreciate who we are and work together to put more Democrats in office. I'd like to acknowledge our club luncheon sponsor, who is also our guest today, Albrechta and Albrechta Law Firm. He's been supporting this luncheon for several years now. If you need legal help, please think about Albrechta and Albrechta. Our speakers today will be Cristin Salaz, owner of WeFill, which is Durango's filling station. Then we'll hear from David Albrechta, a representative from Towards Justice, that's Nina DeSalvo, and Enrique Orozco from Compañeros Four Corners Immigrant Resource Center will speak at the end. Everybody's asked to stay muted except for the speakers, myself, and Gwen Unger, who's going to help with questions. If you want to submit a question different from any that get asked during the luncheon, please use the chat feature on Zoom. That's so down on the bottom, you can just hit chat and this thing will come up. Please do not unmute yourself and speak, but send your questions to everyone in the chat window. So if you're having trouble with your internet connectivity, you may want to disable your video because audio only works better on slower connections. This Zoom meeting is being recorded and will be available within a day or so for viewing at laplatadem's.org. And I'll put that in the chat. You can choose speaker mode, typically in the upper right corner of your Zoom screen, which will bring up a larger video of the person speaking. I would like to encourage everyone to donate to the La Plata County Dems in this non-election year. Well, we do have an election in November, but it's not a big political one. It keeps our office rented, and we can accumulate funds ahead of the need for next year. Monthly donations are particularly appreciated, and you can set those up on ActBlue. Monthly donations make it easy for you to give to the party with relatively little pain. This is our sixth luncheon for 2023. Our committee is working to bring some great programs for the rest of the year. If anyone has any announcements to make, please enter something in the chat window and we'll acknowledge them at the end of the speakers. So I'm going to introduce Cristin Salaz, owner of WeFill. Her website says, WeFill is Durango's original refilling station and zero waste shop stocked with healthy swaps for your body, face, kitchen, and bathroom. Cristin is a wildlife biologist. She's seen the effects of pollution and plastic waste for decades through her travels for work and play. While instructing open water scuba, she encouraged ocean cleanup and pulled garbage on each dive, teaching the students to take pride in caring for the reefs. Her decades living in the pristine mountains of Southwest Colorado have allowed her to cave and boat and ski, hike, and camp, always embracing her responsibility to reduce pollution and garbage in our natural environment. We're all stewards of the land, the sea, and the air, and future generations of all species depending on us. Welcome, Cristin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, everybody. Karen, Kathleen kind of facilitated this, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I was on my walk this morning and I thought, hey, you know what? Politics are pretty personal. And so I am excited to talk about my personal bit with politics and the choices that we make with voting and voting with our dollars today. And my way is through reducing single-use plastic pollution, right? So WeFill is, as Karen said, a refilling station for household and personal care products. People bring in their own containers and we do a tear weight. And you can get as little or as much of any product that you want. So I always encourage people to try stuff before committing to filling all the way up. That way you know if you like it or not. So some of the things Karen kind of covered a little bit about why I'm here as a wildlife biologist. I've seen a lot of degradation going on in our natural environment in the last 30 years or so, not just because of the exponential growth of the human population, but because I think we're lacking in education in so many ways. So that was one of the big challenges of opening up a business like this, is the constant education that I didn't really think about when I opened. I thought, well, if I know about the problem, everybody does. It is a big problem, and my foe is big oil. Kind of a big foe to have as just a little person, but you know, every little thing that we can do really helps out. My shop and our beautiful community has saved now 57,000 pieces of plastic from going into the landfills and waterways. So thank you all who've contributed to that number. And anyway, we're going to keep on keeping on. So yeah, Karen told you a little bit about my scuba diving and biology, but the real reason that WeFill kind of culminated is A, there's no oceans here to teach diving, and I love Durango, so I'm landlocked and loving it. B, my biology work is seasonal and it just wasn't paying the bills. So my father had passed away about 7-8 years ago and left me just enough money to do something like either go diving across the world for a year, which would have been totally irresponsible, bad carbon footprint too, or I could start this business. So I am really pleased that I made the latter decision and did that. So what happened was I was cleaning condos up at Purgatory to kind of, you know, make ends meet. And every time I had to buy cleaning supplies, it was just tearing my heart apart with the plastic. And so that's kind of where the idea dawned, you know, is just what can we do? We need a resource here in Durango. I think it's a big enough city to do it with. And so my husband and I sat down one night with some wine and made the logo, which is an hourglass, which means the time is ticking, everybody. The earth can't sustain how we're doing it for much longer. So every personal little choice we make, even if it's just one little one a day, like picking up a piece of garbage, it all matters with 8 billion people. So yeah, I went around my house, you guys, with a pad and a pad of paper and a pen, and wrote down all the single use in my kitchen, my bathroom, everywhere. And it was astonishing. We don't even have children. And so that's when I was like, we got to do something about this. Durango has welcomed me, which is great. And then I had a great sales day, and then the pandemic started. So I think getting people back to my store after a couple months of being shut down was proving to be even more difficult than starting up in the first place, right? So got to look at my notes here a little bit. So one of the things that is important to me in the store, not just refilling, but I like to have as many locally made products as I can, trying to keep the money as tightly as I can in the community, and also supporting other manufacturers and suppliers of goods. So my shampoo and conditioner bars, my shaving bars, CBD salves, my liquid laundry detergent, among quite a few other things, are made right here in Durango, maybe a little bit over towards Dolores. So that's one of the things that's important to me. Other things that are important: no animal testing on any products in my store. A lot of my suppliers say we like to test on our human friends, not our animal friends, because they have voices and can tell us what's not working, right? I also don't have anything in my store that has palm oil in it. It's one of those ingredients that's ubiquitous. It's in everything. And now they're starting to get secretive about how they label it. Kind of like, remember when high fructose corn syrup came out, and then they had all the different names? They're doing that with palm oil now. So I'm trying to go down the rabbit holes so that my customers don't have to. I'm vetting all the products. And a little bit back to the palm oil thing, it is a monoculture crop that grows best in jungles and rainforests, and it needs full sun. So if you put 2 and 2 together, you can see that there's one more reason to clear cut those beautiful regions, right? With 8 billion people on the planet, it's hard to know what ingredients are safe and okay. So I think we just have to navigate as best we can and do our best to not use as much. I always joke about myself as being a terrible business owner, because I'm always telling people, don't use so much, right? And that's one thing that we can do, is just like kind of cut back on being such consumers. We only need a little bit of shampoo. We don't need a ton, right? So anyway, on that note, I guess what I want to really say to everybody, this is such an important thing, is, and you might have seen it in a meme somewhere, but it's what I resonate with, is we don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need billions of people doing it imperfectly. I don't care if all of your garbage fits in a mason jar for the year for this month. That's not going to help us. We need to be mindful every day. You know, maybe don't eat meat on Mondays. Refill something on a Tuesday, pick up some garbage on a Wednesday, teach some neighbors on a Thursday. So all those little things add up to making a huge impact on our environment. And yeah, that's about all I have to say, other than we really need to leave the earth a better place for future generations of all species, and Keith Richards, because he will outlive us all. And I would love to take any questions if anybody has anything.
I don't see anything in the chat, any questions yet. If somebody has a question, just jot it into the chat real quick. Where's your store located, Cristin?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Gwen. I'm located at 3465 Main Avenue, which is the old North Main Post Office. It is the standalone building that is in the same parking lot as the Durango Joe's and Wells Fargo ATM kiosk. And I am open from Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays, 11 to 3. Website is WeFillColorado.com. You'll have to excuse me, it is under a bit of construction because I am the alpha and omega of my business, even the janitor. So getting to organizing my website has been quite a task.
Did I put the right hours in there?
That's right. Thank you.
I want to ask you, do you sell any bottles with pump tops? I'm looking for one to decant shampoo into and stuff.
Yes.
So you do?
I carry a few glass and aluminum containers, jars and pump bottles. I don't have too much because I only have 700 square feet. Yeah. So I'm really encouraging people to bring in their own containers. But you know, a lot of people are trying to transition from getting all the plastic out of their house. So I say, hey, let's make that lazy plastic work more than one job. Let's use it till it breaks. And when the pump breaks or the bottle gets a crack in it, then it's time to maybe get something prettier. Another great option are mason jars. I have stainless steel pump lids for those. So you can, you know, use that for dish soap and hand soap, and it's kind of a cool look in your kitchen and bathroom.
That's great. And I noticed you mentioned shampoo and shave bars. That's a new thing people are trying to get into. Is
yes. You know, there's a lot of reasons those are great, Karen. The number one reason I think is there's only 4 main ingredients in those. So they don't, excuse me, strip your hair or create buildup. And they're great for traveling. If you just want to take a carry-on bag, you don't have to check anything. The bars are the greatest way to go.
That's travel. I hadn't even thought of that. It's not even liquid. What about these new dryer, not dryer sheets, washing machine sheets that are on the market? Are you thinking of getting them made locally so you save all the water and the plastic and the thing?
You know what, Karen, I do carry some. They're out of Canada. The Canadians are leaps and bounds ahead of us in this realm of zero waste and sustainability. Excuse me. So I get them from Canada, but I do get them in bulk and no plastic is in the packaging. So you can come in and say, hey, I just want to try them out. And you can just get 1 square. And I have those in unscented and then a fresh linen scent. Those are also great for traveling.
Great. Thank you. Kathleen, that's what you're talking about. The unpackaged laundry papers is what you just mentioned, right? Yeah. Cool. Anyone else have any questions?
You might, Cristin, you might just kind of tell us, you know, what your best sellers are. I mean, you can kind of just highlight some of the things that people really get.
Sure, Gwen. My best sellers are definitely the shampoo and conditioner bars and my locally made laundry detergent. So I think there's a correlation between the people that want to refill and take care of the earth, those people also want to shop locally and support local businesses. So everything that I have local I can't keep it on the shelves. So those are definitely my best products. One of the things that is kind of up and coming and it took a while for people to realize I had it, was amazing facial products. So I have great facial products with high organic content that don't break the bank. So instead of like $50 or $80 an ounce for eye cream, mine's $5 an ounce. So I always encourage people, save all those little jars and canisters and just try stuff out. See if you like it, because we shouldn't have to spend a fortune. And I think that's one of the other things, is a lot of people that has deterred people from coming to my shop. They think it's going to be very expensive. And I just did a run over at Krager's looking at some Mrs. Meyer's products. And they're about twice as much as mine for the same sort of stuff. So you can actually save some money depending on how you shop at my store. It's actually less expensive than single use.
Okay, and I see Karen put in there, Kirby asks, how do you avoid plastic when you go food shopping?
Oh boy. Well, I don't really go to the grocery store anymore because I come home angry. So that's one of the tasks that my husband's like, let me do this so that we're happy in the evenings when you're home. So instead of getting angry in the produce area, Gwen, when I'm seeing people stuff bananas into a plastic bag, I just carry some of my business cards. And I say, hey, if you want to learn how to reduce plastic in your life, I can help you out with that. But those have a wrapper and they don't need a bag. And so this is why I don't really do the grocery store very much. And I have a hard time, honestly, you guys, at the farmer's market too. They don't make it easy because there's a lot of plastic there as well. And some of them won't let me dump their stuff in plastic into my bags. So I don't go to the farmer's market anymore either. I just stay on the north end of town where I'm safe.
Well, we're all used to bringing our own bags to the market now, and even Walmart, and you can bring your own veggie bags if you can find them.
Yep. And I have those for sale. So I have good produce bags at the shop too.
Oh, great. That's
Yep.
excellent. All right. Well, no more questions.
Thank you so much. It was an honor talking with you guys, and I really appreciate the invitation. And yeah, thank you.
I really
Thank you, Cristin.
glad we had you here. Thanks, Kathleen Adam, for bringing this forward.
Thanks, Kathleen.
All right, we're going to move on to the second part of our presentation today. David Albrechta is a local employment attorney who's passionate about public lands and nature conservation. He works primarily in the areas of general civil litigation, employment law, and business planning and consulting. He likes all forms of outdoor recreation. He's hiked and rafted in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska, and he's trekked the Indian Himalayas. He is currently working with Towards Justice on living wage issues and more. And then our other guest, Nina DeSalvo from Towards Justice, is a nonprofit law firm that represents workers in litigation and other advocacy in efforts to build worker power and advance justice in our home state of Colorado and across the country. Then we'll hear from Enrique Orozco from Compañeros. He'll provide some information about how minimum wages impact marginalized communities such as immigrants in Durango. So welcome, David.
Thanks, Karen. Good to see everyone. So I'm going to talk briefly, just give a little introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to Enrique and Nina to talk about some other details. But as Karen said, about 90% of my practice is employment law for employees. So I represent employees who are dealing with discrimination, harassment. We do a lot of workplace safety and whistleblowing issues, and then of course wage and hour issues, which are fairly prevalent area of the practice. So what precipitated this conversation today is that I'm a member of a group called PELA, which is the Plaintiffs Employment Lawyers Association out of Denver. And that's a group that supports and advocates for workers, and then also supports lawyers who only work for employees and represent employees. And at the annual conference last year, Nina and I got to have lunch, and we were talking about these recent changes to the Colorado Wage Claim Act, which allows local governments to pass their own minimum wage so long as it's higher than the state minimum wage. The state minimum wage right now is about $13.65 an hour. And if a local municipal government, county government wants to have one that's higher, they can do that now under those changes. So we were talking about how kind of surprising it is that many of these smaller mountain communities that have very high costs of living and depend a great deal on our service workers and recreational workers and hospitality workers, most of whom are making a minimum wage, have not done that, have not gone out of their way to increase their minimum wage. And so as we were talking about how Durango would be a good fit for that, I was kind of lamenting the approach to the housing issue, which in my view is a double-sided coin. On one side, it's nice to do the affordable housing projects that are happening and increase housing. The other side, which I think is not being addressed, is you got to pay people a wage that they can afford rent, even in an affordable housing unit, which is sometimes unaffordable. So anyways, we got talking about that. We've kind of continued that conversation over the last year, and now are kind of moving into a place where we want to try to do some coalition building and see if we can get some interest locally to kind of put this topic into the conversation and eventually approach potentially elected officials and see if this is something that's doable. So that's why we're here. I guess I would conclude my brief remarks by just saying I've represented a lot of employees here in Durango who don't get paid wages that they have earned or are not being paid just even the basic minimum wage. I think a lot of us maybe have a skewed perception that that's something that doesn't happen all that often, but I can assure you that that's not the case. It happens all the time. There are plenty of businesses that go above and beyond and are paying their employees very well. There are a number that aren't. And I would just note that I think in my experience, the hospitality industry and the recreation industry are both really prone to minimum wage violations because they're easy jobs to pay piecemeal, which we see a lot, which means let's say like a raft guide, you get paid per trip, or hospitality, you get paid per room. And those rates don't always equate to a minimum wage when you actually do the math. And a lot of times the workers don't even know it. They assume they're being paid what they just trust their employer. And a lot of times that's not working out. So increasing minimum wage would address some of that, but it also addresses a much broader issue of just, paying workers a wage that they can afford to live where they work, which is the primary issue here. So I'm going to hand it to Enrique next, who's just going to talk a little bit about some more of those types of examples and how this is not just wages often, have kind of an increased impact on groups of people based on race, immigration status, whatever that may be. And so he's going to address some of that. And then Nina will kind of close with us with more of the underlying policy and statewide examples of how this is going. And then I'll take some questions. So Enrique, that's all yours.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Enrique Orozco. I'm the co-executive director of Compañeros Four Corners Immigrant Resource Center. We are a grassroots organization that does immigration advocacy. And I'm here to talk about the impact of what moving or raising the minimum wage could have on a community such as the immigrant community. As we know, a large part of our economic sector, especially our workforce, is done with migrant labor. What we're seeing is we're having families come here and having to work 2-3 jobs. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Durango Tango. We joke about it, but I mean, the reality is we shouldn't have something called the Durango Tango. We have a lot of families in the immigrant community, especially young kids, who are having to work because what they're getting paid is, and this is another new term, is poverty wages. We have people literally working full-time jobs. We're having folks from the left and the right say, you know, get picked up by your bootstraps, and if you work, you're going to make it in this country. That's not true anymore because of poverty wages. 1375 or 65 will not pay rent in Durango anymore. And what this does is this leads to families becoming unbalanced. You have parents who are missing their kids' events, life events, missing school meetings, or during the pandemic when families literally who were undocumented couldn't stop working because they didn't have the social safety net that we all had. They had to keep working, and they were threatened with things like, hey, your kid isn't on Zoom class, so we're going to call Child Protective Services on you. The ripple effect of keeping minimum wage where it is tremendous on immigrant families. And they come here knowing that even this little bit is going to go further for them than anything else, but that shouldn't be the way. I run an after-school program called La Escuelita, and a big part of what this program does is, besides supplemental education, is it provides parents relief after work when they can't get to their schools, to their kids' schools, when they're still working in the kitchens. Just remember, when we're enjoying our medium rare steak at the Orr House or Seasons or wherever, you know, a large time it's an immigrant worker who's cooking that for you. And that's probably, they're probably on their 16th hour of the day, because having one job and providing for a family here is unattainable. And that's just the truth of where we're living. And this also folds into housing, how I mentioned earlier. You know, we're having a housing crisis here. Housing went up 36% in 2 years. How are people working minimum wages supposed to keep up with the increase of rent? How are we supposed to buy our homes when we can't even afford to live in a home? These are things that people have to realize. We're all very fortunate that the majority of us in this room are sitting in our homes feeling safe and secure. But that's not the case for many people that I am fortunate enough to work with. The truth of the matter is that no party, Dems, Republicans, whatever, have ever really fought for this enough. And if they have, it's been the bare minimum. $15 an hour, that is nothing. That is nothing. Yet that's the high bar that political parties have set as like where we want to get to. And that's a low bar. And how are we supposed to make these changes when even our own officials at a local level are disconnected from this? We need to create more spaces so that the most impacted have a space at the table, so then our elected officials can actually hear this and make the change that's needed. I know a lot of the undocumented families are suffering right now, and their kids are missing their parents because their parents can not afford to even work 2 jobs. A lot of the families I work with are working 3 jobs, sleeping very little, barely eating, just so they can live the quote unquote American dream. But that's not the truth. Not even our own citizens can live the American dream right now. Talk to a service industry worker who's living in the back of their truck. When you go rafting, a lot of those kids are sleeping in the back of their trucks because they can't afford anything. So what I would say is, yes, the impact of this on community of colors is greater just because of what the systems have been put in place. And we're seeing our Latina and immigrant families really, really take a hit here. And if we don't support them by, can you guys hear me? By raising this this minimum wage, then our communities of color, especially our immigrant community, which is a huge foundation for our workforce, you're going to see start fading out more and more into the background because it's not sustainable anymore here. That's all I have to say for that. Sorry, it's kind of a downer, but it's the truth. But I'm going to pass it to Nina. I could keep talking for hours, but that's where I got to stop. Nina DeSalvo from Towards Justice.
Thanks so much, Enrique, and thanks everybody. I mean, I feel like I can't give the same context Enrique can give as an organizer, really working closely with the community. It's, you know, such important work, and also you can't help but get fired up when you see how hard people's day-to-day lives can become. But yeah, I'm Nina. I'm an attorney. I'm the policy director with a Denver-based organization called Towards Justice. As Karen mentioned, most of our work is representing workers in litigation, but my job in particular is related to policy work, mostly in the state of Colorado, but I do some local work around the state. And I've been excited by this 2019 law that Dave mentioned that allows local governments in Colorado to adopt their own local wage that is right for their community and makes sense for their economy, makes sense for businesses and workers alike. And it does seem that Durango is a really unique place. I mean, for lots of reasons that you all know better than I, but a unique place to think about the power of a local wage for a few reasons. You know, first, the cost of living in Durango and the state minimum wage really don't line up. Durango needs a higher wage to ensure that its residents can meet their basic needs. And Durango also has a local community foundation that may be supportive of exploring a local wage proposal. You also have a lot of local businesses that already pay a lot more than minimum wage. And this La Plata Thrive effort that has been ongoing for, I understand, a long time, that has engaged a lot of these local businesses who feel strongly about good wages being part of their business model in this conversation already. So Durango has some sort of unique alignment of businesses and workers that I think reflects the fact that local minimum wages are not just about helping workers, they're also about helping local businesses. You know, raising the minimum wage often improves worker productivity. It reduces turnover in ways that saves local businesses lots of money. It also increases consumer spending in our communities. You know, low wage community members spend the money that they earn. They might rather save. They don't have enough to save, so they're going to spend whatever they earn, and they spend it in their local community. This year's 2023 report on local minimum wage from the Colorado Department of Labor, I'll put a link to it in the chat in a minute. But it presents data showing that Denver's local minimum wage, which went into effect in 2019 and is substantially higher than the state wage, it's allowed the city's sales tax revenue to increase more quickly than any comparable municipality, suggesting that, you know, goods keep moving and workers continue consuming and businesses are not passing along wage increases to consumers in unsustainable ways. The report also showed that in both 21 and 22, Denver's minimum wage not only rose significantly, but its unemployment rate simultaneously dropped more than any other comparator jurisdiction. But as Enrique said, I think, you know, raising the minimum wage is also about supporting the most vulnerable workers and families in Durango or in any community. You know, the cost of living in Durango has increased dramatically in recent years, and the state minimum wage is just not enough for workers to meet their basic needs. They can't afford groceries and healthcare and childcare. Like, they can't. You know, people are really struggling, and, you know, Enrique can give you like the real stories, but these painful struggles where, you know, you can't afford internet, so your kid can't do their homework at home. You can't afford gas to get to work. You know, your mind is burdened by the stress, by the debt, by all of these things. And like Dave said, you know, Durango's workers, they want to grow their roots in their town, in their community, but they don't earn enough to live where they work. And so for all of these reasons, it feels like Durango is sort of ripe to really think about what local wage would be right for your community and right for both businesses and workers. I think Dave also asked me to address the sort of why a local minimum wage initiative in Durango would really be a part of a bigger movement a movement, frankly, a nationwide movement that empowers local governments to do what's right in their communities and to respond nimbly to the unique needs of their communities in ways that, the state and the national government are just not, they're not responding nimbly. The federal minimum wage is like $7.25. This is not nimble or responsive to anything, right? But local governments can. And Colorado only opened the door to local control over minimum wages in 2019. But since then, only Denver and Edgewater, they're the only two municipalities in the state that have adopted a local wage. So there's real opportunity. It looks like the Boulder County will adopt a local wage beginning in January of 24. And the other municipality that tried and was unable to move forward an ordinance to adopt local wage was Fort Collins. And they decided not to move forward this fall. So I think I also, a lot of national eyes are on Colorado in this sense. We see Colorado taking the progressive step of empowering local governments, but simultaneously we see a lot of more conservative states are rolling back local control. So Durango could really, help demonstrate nationally that removing state preemption works. It allows municipalities to be responsive to the real and unique needs of their communities. So for all of those reasons, I see like lots of opportunity and excitement around this possibility in Durango. And I think Dave can talk a little bit more about next steps and just ways that you all might be interested in engaging, supporting, helping us think about how something like this might work in Durango.
Yeah, thanks, Nina and Enrique. Thank you both. Yeah, so we're putting together a meeting, kind of a campaign planning and strategy meeting on October 5th. We're still kind of ironing out exact time and how that's going to work. Our goal is to put together a plan and a strategy for how we're going to approach this issue and bring it to Durango to see if it's doable. I mean, it's still very early. We're just presenting the topic to see what the interest levels are, giving our opinions about it, and then we'll see. The beauty of local control is we see what the community wants to do with it. So yeah, October 5th, we'll get details together pretty soon and get it to Karen and Gwen to share with the party, and we'll be advertising it. But we just want to get a group together to talk about possibilities and what it looks like moving forward. Yeah, I don't think I have anything beyond that. The meeting is going to be, we do have the location, which is at the Fort Lewis College Business Innovation Center in the main mall downtown. And we're kind of looking for what we're hoping is that we can get, I always, when I talk about this with people, there's obviously a lot of very loud opposition to this kind of plan from small businesses, from certain small businesses and the business community generally. But I think we do have a lot of small businesses that are already doing this that will be on board. For them, this is just leveling the playing field to make sure everybody's playing by the same rules. So I think it's advantageous that way. And then the other side of that is there are way more workers than there are business owners. And so, our goal is to try to get the attention of our hourly wage workers and get them interested in this and get them to this meeting so that we can build a strong support group and coalition behind this. So if anyone's interested, you can reach out to me. I'll get you kind of, in the loop with Nina and Enrique, and as things are evolving, I'll keep you updated. So any questions, comments?
David, I put a question in the chat, and maybe you could expound on a little bit more as to whether, you talked about wage theft being such a huge problem. And so it occurred to me, is that something that's criminal? Is it civil? How do you actually address that going forward? And how do we encourage businesses that perhaps don't know, what they're supposed to be doing to step up and pay people for the time that they spend and so on. So if you could expound on that a little bit, that'd be great.
I can. So there are a handful of ways to address that. So there are both civil and criminal penalties for wage violations of whatever type. The issue with criminal penalties are that obviously the DA has to bring the charges, and it's kind of up to them to do that, which I haven't seen done yet. I've only had a couple of clients approach the local DA's office and or call the police, file a wage theft report, and usually they don't go anywhere. So the civil process is a little easier, or at least more accessible than the criminal process is. Employees can just file complaints directly with the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor now has authority to issue actual penalties and orders and force businesses to pay, which is still fairly new and is great. It gives workers a lot more accessibility to those remedies. Or you can hire a lawyer and you can go through the court system and file a case and go at it that way. So there's a lot of options. If a complaint is filed with the Department of Labor against an employer, they actually get put on a list that gets published every year. And that's only if they make a finding and they find that there's a violation. But that and then if another one gets filed, there are increased penalties basically. That's one way that, or at least a big incentive for employers to not do this. In terms of educating employers, in theory, they're supposed to be hanging up their employees' rights posters, and they should know all of this if they're hiring people, but many of them don't. I think there's also there's a lot of stuff that happens between setting how you're going to pay your employees and then the actual paying them. And I don't know, I can't speak to why or how that happens. I have my opinions about it, but and as far as educating them goes, it's kind of up to them, frankly.
I will jump in. One thing Dave said that I think is so important too, as you think about like local minimum wage. I mean, obviously you want whatever local minimum wage exists to be enforceable, right? Like people shouldn't just be supposed to do it, they should actually do it. But a nice thing about this Colorado Department of Labor wage claim process that Dave mentioned, not only does the department have substantial sort of teeth to make sure an employer actually pays a wage determination, but they also enforce local minimum wages. So like a person, like the city and county of Denver has pretty robust enforcement agency of its own, but a local municipality can pass its own local wage sort of number without dumping resources into enforcement. It can use the resources through the State Department of Labor to enforce a local wage.
And I'll add for the community I work in, there's still a lot of fear to report that. So a lot of times we don't even know that people are actually going through that because of the fear of reporting it. So even if our English speakers don't know where to report it, it's even less for our monolingual Spanish speaker immigrant community. So and it is a huge issue. I mean, there's a lot of times we call organizations like Towards Justice to figure out, how to resolve this, but it is a huge issue in the migrant worker community, wage theft. And a lot of people are afraid to report it because a lot of the bosses will be like, I know your immigration status, and will hold that over their head.
Yeah, we could probably keep piggybacking like this for a while, the three of us. But I've got a whole slew of examples like that are horrific when you hear about them, and they're happening here in your local community. The retaliation that occurs when people raise concerns about wages. A lot of employers still believe that they can enforce policies that prevent employees from talking about wages, which is no longer true. And I'm still seeing that. I saw it last week. And then on top of that, a lot of employees just don't even know when wage violations are happening because the wage law is pretty complex. And a lot of times I'll have people come in that are just upset because they feel like there's a hostile work environment, which a lot of times there isn't because you can't connect it to a protected class. But then I'll ask to look at pay stubs and look at some other stuff. And all of a sudden I'm like, you realize you're not getting paid a minimum wage. And a lot of times they just don't, for whatever reason, the pay structure, how it's set up, they don't realize it. So it's an interesting and complex issue because of those factors. A lot of people just don't even know that the violations are occurring. The laws are complex. The payment structures can be complex. It's just a strange area, but raising the minimum wage just brings the floor up, that even if violations are occurring, at least there's a standard that's higher. And it, I think, just helps the whole issue in general. So.
But
Anything else?
I'd love to hear from all of you. Like, is this a crazy idea? What do you think?
I'm looking in the chat for, go ahead, Cristin.
So, as a small business owner, I am all about like paying somebody a living wage, but I don't even pay myself one. And so for a lot of us that are small, I pay myself like way less than minimum wage. And luckily for me, I don't have a lot of bills and I don't have children and I don't have car payments and I can make this work, but that's not the case for most people, right? And so what about, somebody like me that wants to employ someone? It's, obvious. I mean, the one girl I do have, I pay her a great wage because I want her to love my business. But so for some people, for little places, it's harder to do that. I think maybe, big box stores and big chains are the ones that need to really step up their game and set the foundation for it. I don't know how to say it. I'm just saying from my standpoint, that's why I can't open 7 days a week, because I can't afford to pay somebody what I would want to pay them, right?
Yeah, no, Cristin, I think it's a real issue. And I think that's why figuring out like what the number is that makes sense for Durango is so important. I mean, I think no business should operate if the way that they make a profit is on the backs of the most vulnerable workers
Absolutely
in our community.
not.
I also recognize that we want small businesses to succeed. And I think there are lots of ways to cut costs that are not cutting them out of your workers' wages. I also think that, at the end of the day, like a minimum wage would have to apply community wide. You wouldn't have like a small business exception. But as you're experiencing with your one employee, the market doesn't really allow you to pay minimum wage in Durango anyway and get somebody who shows up and is reliable.
Right.
So
right.
you're not probably paying her minimum wage anyway.
No.
So I don't think, even for businesses as small and precarious as yours, that it would actually raise the wage that you pay this particular, person that you have on staff now, because the market's not allowing minimum
Right.
wage. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Nina.
Sure.
There was Barb Day put something that said, I canvass door to door. And when I ask people what their concerns are, these are the things people want to know more about. Your info would be great to give them. Is there some way that we can get flyers or single sheets or something that kind of go over these things and hand them out to people?
I think that's a great idea. I think the idea of this October meeting is really to be like a strategic planning session. How do we take this idea and make it into like a real campaign that can be meaningful for Durango? And that's, I think, a great strategy of like something that folks might want to do to engage more community members. But I don't know that like right this second we can do it, but I think it would be cool to have as many of you as would be interested join us in October. It can be in person. We can really like hash out like what next steps we can take to engage more folks.
Yeah, that's great.
I had put something in the chat way back mentioning that one of the ways employers fight back is to just say, hey, I'm not going to have any full-time employees. I'm just going to have part-time, no benefits. So that's the other half of minimum wage is you get nothing with it. You're unprotected.
Yeah, and I think I tried to respond in the chat. I don't know if I ever clicked send. I think that's a really important point, Karen. It's actually something we tried to work on at the state level unsuccessfully so far, but a lot of municipalities around the country have passed, they're usually embedded in fair scheduling laws that include like access to hours provisions that protect workers from exactly that, making sure that they do get access to hours that even whether or not it bumps them up into being benefit eligible. That's something that Durango has the power to do. It could be a piece built into a local wage ordinance, or it could be a separate piece of legislation if you have progressive city council members who care about workers.
And another thing, do you think this presentation could be a study session at city council to bring them up to speed, or would that be after they've already watched this presentation and then you contact them?
Yeah, if they were interested, I think we'd be more than happy to do that. Nina's got a whole lot of other contacts and people that have actually gone through this process in Denver and Boulder and Fort Collins, which I think would be really helpful to hear from people that have lived it and seen how it worked on the local level. So yeah, the short answer is yes. I think if they were willing to listen to us, we're both lawyers, we're willing to talk.
So there's another question from Barb said, Biden has something new about workers, ? Can you explain this better for me? Does that ring any bells with anybody?
I think it was about overtime hours. I just briefly heard it happen last week, so I don't know if it's a suggestion or if it's an actual bill. Thanks. If you knew more about that.
I think it's the DOL is considering increasing the minimum salary threshold for overtime exemption. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, it is. I think they're 55,000, I think, is the increase.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's basically so so overtime gets complicated, and there's state and federal rules and regulations about overtime. But workers who can be paid overtime usually have to fall below a salary threshold. There are other tests too, like they can't be management or supervisors, and there's a whole set of standards to determine whether you're exempt or non-exempt. But if you are an employee that can receive overtime, they're looking at basically raising that number that is the threshold for whether you get overtime or not. And usually the employees making more than that do not get paid overtime. And so by raising that number, more employees would qualify for overtime. And that's, it's a popular kind of workers' rights topic because because of those different tests, employers traditionally have had a lot of avenues or loopholes to avoid paying employees overtime. So if you've got an employee that doesn't actually manage people, but you slap the manager title on them, for a while they could get away with doing that. That's kind of gone away now, but that's an example of a way that employers have tried to play this game to get out of paying employees overtime.
And you need to be a 40-hour full-time worker to even think about overtime?
Not Not always. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you've got to work more than 40 hours in a week to get overtime. So yes, or more than 12 hours in a day. So I suppose you could work less than 40 hours in a week and have a 15-hour day and still get paid overtime. So I guess no.
The interesting link I put up, it's way back in the chat now, is a minimum wage calculator. And for us, it's really scary. It's if you have 2 children, a living wage for one adult is $50. If you have 2 adults, but one working with 2 children, it's 41. If two adults are working and you have 2 kids, then it gets down to $27. So that I assume that means each has to earn $27. So it's per county, so they factor in all the other housing costs and stuff like that. It's really sobering to realize how many people are making it at a quarter of that or whatever they're making, you know. Oh, and Nina, you put in MIT living wage?
I think that you had put a link to that. There's the MIT living wage. Is that
that's
what
the
you're
one.
on, Karen?
Yeah, that's the one I put up in there.
Yeah, there's also the state of Colorado. There's a self-sufficiency index published by the Colorado Center for Law and Poverty that is somewhat similar in its approach, and has been used as the basis for the Boulder County proposal for minimum wage. I know we're running out of time, but the only other thing I'll say, when you list those numbers that are sort of scary, I think especially for folks like Cristin who have employees, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to pay $40 an hour, I can't, is the state law that allows municipalities in Colorado to adopt a local wage requires that local wage phase in slowly. So no matter what we might want for workers in Durango, the wage can only go up at most 15% per year. And so that allows for a slow phase in to ensure that businesses can accommodate these changes in their expenses. I think it's also interesting that most businesses, even labor heavy businesses, labor costs are a very small percentage of their overall business costs. So increasing labor costs by 15% is a very small change for overall business cost.
And you said that's a state limitation, the 15?
The 50% is a state limitation. Yep.
That's slow.
It's slow. Yeah. So even if $40 an hour is really what would allow people to live with dignity in Durango, we're not getting there anytime soon.
I didn't know about that. That's something. Well, I guess if there's no other questions, I'll wrap it up by thanking Enrique, who has left already, but we'll thank him for you guys, and Nina from Towards Justice, and David Albrechta from his own practice here in Durango. And I'll mention all the announcements that I put in the chat. Tonight, the protest at the Durango VFW is at 5 o'clock to let the community know we don't stand for having Moms for Liberty in our town. The VFW is only hosting the meeting. They have nothing to do with the group coming. So they're kind of aware of the protests. They met with the protesters and they're really helping. They called their own security team in to watch over the protesters. So that's a very good thing. They were like, fine, this is good. So I think it'll be a do not engage kind of thing tonight. Everybody has that. If anybody hassles the protesters, they're all told don't get involved. So 5 o'clock at the DFW if we see you. Anything else, Gwen?
I think that's it, Karen. It's some really good presentations there, and like Karen said, we'll get the recording out and send out an email with the recording link here within a day or so.
All righty, and I'll be sending it to the city council so they can get a heads up. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. See you tonight.
Thank you all.